At the end of this week's Parsha, in Beha'aloscha, we get to chapter 12, and we read the curious story involving Miriam, the great prophetess, the sister of Aaron and of Moses. Miriam criticizes Moses in a conversation with Aaron. And she says to Aaron, I don't get it. You and I are both prophets. We have normal marital relationships. Why did Moses, after coming down with the Torah, separate from his wife and become celibate? Doesn't make sense. And God himself comes down from heaven and tells Miriam and Aaron, you don't get it. Moses is different. Yeah, you're prophets, but you, like every other prophet, speak to me and get your prophecies while you're unconscious. I'm only speaking to you in a dream. With Moses, we speak to each other face to face. He's wide awake. He's conscious. He's different. And that's right. He had to separate from his spouse. And Miriam gets punished for having violated the strictures prohibiting lashon hara, saying something negative about someone else. She gets a terrible skin disease. Aaron is forced to intercede with Moses on her behalf. He begs Moses to pray for her. And Moses, to his credit, even though he was the subject of her criticism, prays for her. Just 5 words. God, please heal her now. And God does. So it's your classic story. Big sister, jealous of younger brother, talks some smack about him. God gets upset. God punishes her. She gets healed after her younger brother, feeling bad for her, prays for her. She learns her lesson. We learn her lesson. And there's the story, right? Wrong. Because there's so much more built into this story. Because that same Miriam, years before, when she was about 7 years old, found herself in the same predicament. Pharaoh in Egypt, when the Jews were slaves, had decreed on the advice of his astronomers that every Jewish male born had to be cast into the Nile and killed to prevent the birth of the Jewish savior that the astronomers were foretelling. So Amram, the leader of the Jewish people, Miriam's father, decided to separate from his wife, and many other Jewish men followed suit. And Miriam got a prophecy. The prophecy was that her parents would give birth to the Jewish savior. So she marched into her father, and she said, Dad, you're worse than Pharaoh. And her father said something along the lines of, I presume, I'm sorry, young lady, run that by me again? And she said, that's right, Daddy, you heard me. Pharaoh decreed only against the Jewish boys. Your decree is against the Jewish boys and the Jewish girls. You need to get back together with Mom. And he smiled, and he kissed her, and he said, you're right. And they got back together. And Moses was born. So by standing up against celibacy, against separating from your spouse, Miriam changed the course of Jewish history. She made sure Moses was born. Fast forward the clock. Of all people in the world to separate from their spouse, Moses, she can't believe it. She's got to take a stand again. The last time she saved the Jewish people, it's time for her to step in again. So she critiques him. And God himself comes down from heaven and says, Miriam, you're wrong. Moses had to separate from his wife. He's different. And you can almost imagine Miriam saying, I'm sorry, God. Please, one more time, for posterity, he records it in the Torah so that we'll know, that's right, Miriam's right. You don't separate from your spouse. Only Moses, only that one time. He's the only exception, but nobody else. Not even a prophet. Nobody before and nobody since. No monks, no nuns, not in our religion. We don't believe in celibacy. We don't believe in abstinence. We believe in partaking of the physical, normal physical relationships, and then elevating the physical to the spiritual. That, perhaps, is the deeper lesson subtly built in to what Miriam was doing at the end of this week's Parsha.